have a very interactive discussion and engage. I have colleagues from Absa Bank as well. Isaac is also on the call, and we have some other colleagues also from Absa Bank. In the chat, you'll probably be seeing people posting, and when the questions come in, I request that if someone asks a question, please, you don't need to be from Absa. Let's be able to handle the questions together and let's share this knowledge so that we're able to improve our environment. And like Anita said, you see the act or the legislation in our country, Uganda, is a legislation that is here to ensure that we protect our customers and all other stakeholders. Sometimes we, as the people who implement these controls, they might look like they are too hectic, arduous, costly, but imagine that these controls are being implemented by another person who actually is rendering a service to you. You definitely want to be sure that you can trust another processor with your information. So on our side, as frontline ambassadors of the Personal Data Protection Office, we are here to share this knowledge and improve our different environments in our organization. So I will request that let it be very interactive. Yes, we have slides that we are projecting. However, we will not stick to them, and will definitely be handling different matters here and there based on our experiences. At Absa Bank, maybe to give you a brief understanding of how the setup is here, we have data privacy sitting at both first line and second line. So at first line, they own that risk and they own the risk and they go into the implementation of the different controls that have been put in place. Then second line comes in. Second line is the principal risk owner and also owns the policies and standards that guide on privacy. So they come in to give advisory and sometimes, of course, where there is check and challenge. Privacy does not stop within the day-to-day business operations, but it moves into different committees. And here we have risk committees. Those committees also reporting to the board. And just like Bank of Ghana risk management guidelines require that board has oversight over different risks, so privacy also moves into the board to ensure that they have oversight over privacy. So to dive into our discussion, I'll try to make it a bit shorter than probably the time that you would have expected so that we can be able to take in questions from our side, but also to get contributions and supplements from the different people on the call. So data flow mapping is our topic today. And what is it really? It's something that is very simple to explain to a layman. You'll just tell them, yeah, a flow map is, it's a visual. It's a visual expression of how data flows from the time I receive it to the time maybe I let it go. Uh, I terminate that relationship between me and the data. So if you're to tell someone, you definitely want to use the word visualization. But to give maybe a detailed explanation, I would say that data flow mapping is the process of creating data flow diagrams. And diagrams is very important here because you don't want to just use text which will look like it's a policy document or a standard document. No, it's a flow map, and therefore we create data flow diagrams. And why do we create these diagrams? We create them to show how the data is flowing through the different applications, the networks. You might be having applications in the day and age where we are. It's very hard for someone to run a business without an application. But you know what? Even a farmer who is on his farm, who is probably not using probably his phone to track his records, even if he doesn't use an application, he can actually draw a flow map for data. Why? Because we all receive and process information in a certain way. So these diagrams should show you how the data is flowing through the different applications. If you have them, maybe you have one or you have 10 applications. And if those applications exist, it definitely means you actually have a network because those applications are speaking to each other. Then you might also be having some containers, you might be having some storage points, and later we also want to look at data touch points. So this diagram should be able to have an overarching image of how the data is flowing through those different elements. We'll be looking at the details later on, but to make it simple for someone, it's a visual expression of how data flows. Yeah, so maybe to go to some key concepts in privacy. If I'm explaining to someone and probably they are still trying to figure out what data is. So imagine you have some new people in your organization and they're still trying to understand why we have this kind of legislation. Some of the key concepts you need to bring to their understanding include things like personal data. Yes, we are talking about data, but what is personal data? Let me just, yeah. So one of the key concepts here would be explaining to them personal data. That's number one. Then number two, what is a data subject? When we are talking about data privacy, what is a data subject, or who is a data subject? And then the other thing would probably not want to leave out or miss out when you come to processing. So personal data. Here, we would uh, use this definition here that we have put as abstract, saying that any data, and in brackets we're saying including special personal data, because later we will see what special personal data is. So we are saying any data relating to a living, a natural person, and where applicable, an existing juristic person, and this data might be either in electronic or hard copy format. So personal data, we're saying any data including special personal data relating to a living, natural person or a juristic person. So living person, someone would definitely understand because you're speaking to them, they know you're speaking about them. Then they say, okay, but what do you mean by a juristic person? Juristic person is a legal entity. You and maybe two of you will go and form a company, register it. Immediately that company is going to get a registration number, just like you and me have a NIN number. When we come together, create that entity, we all understand what a juristic person is. But if you're explaining to another person, that is a simple way to let them understand that data relating to that kind of arrangement. Someone has opened up a company, it's registered, it becomes a legal entity, and therefore that also becomes a person that we're interested in when we talk about privacy. So electronic and hard copy format, of course, if the data is sitting on a piece of paper, it is also important. You go to do mobile money, you're transferring some money, and someone is giving you a registration book, and you're signing in that book because it is a requirement. But while you sign in the book, you're seeing my name, you're seeing my phone number, you're seeing how much I've transferred, maybe you're seeing my NIN, maybe that is personal data sitting on a hard copy. Or you've opened an account for someone and you're having paper. That's an application form for an account. That's hard copy. Then electronic, of course, as we know, we are now in a digital era. So when we go to data subject, this is the person we are interested in. We have already said there could be living or there could be a juristic person. And we're saying that this is a person that you and me, your organization and my organization, where we are collecting their data, we are using their data. The moment we collect their data, they become a data subject to us. The moment we collect that data, it means we're going to use that data. Sometimes we don't use the data, it remains seated somewhere, but we collected it. It's a risk. But well, we are saying the moment you collect that data, you use the data and you process the data, which might include existing and prospective customers. Maybe these are customers, we are collecting information from them for new products, or someone is a prospective customer, counterparties, employees, directors, contractors, and all those people we engage with. The moment to collect their data, they become a data subject. Processing, the third one there, we're saying that when we record a whole personal data or carrying out any operation or any kind of operations on the data we've collected, then that means we are processing it. What kind of operations are we talking about here? It might include, yes, we've collected the data, but maybe you're altering the data. You collected my data, I gave you my name, I gave you my details, my NIN, and then the moment you remove one letter, you are now altering the data, or you're merging the data. You collected data from here, from maybe my school, and then you collected data from a hospital, you're merging it. Or you collected data from the credit operating team, and now you're also looking for some more data about me from the account opening team. You want to put it together, you're merging it. Linking, of course, where we are going, now we are trying to find ways to integrate the data so that it's not sitting in silos. That's why you see that currently we are now moving to using NINs. You know, there is that requirement by the DPF that we all are compliant to the NIN requirement and the registration for companies. Those numbers, why? Because we want to link the data. You organize the data, you disseminate it, porting or storing or retrieving, disclosing, erasing, and all the others there. That's processing. So the moment you get the data, all those other things you do with the data is part of processing. But you know what? Even when you get the data and you don't do anything to it, you're storing it. So that still remains processing of data. What forms personal data? We won't take a lot of time here because these are concepts that we normally deal with. So under personal data, we have the non-personal and also the personal data. So on this side, we have highlighted what the non-personal data would be. And that would include things like your policies and standards, in your organization. It includes things like network diagrams. Yes, it's a network diagram. It shows me that I have about 20 ports on this floor. They are all positioned in the different corners, and this is how they connect. This is where the switch that they feed into, and the switch connects them to the server. That's a network diagram. It's non-personal data because there is no data that is relating to a living person and that can identify them. Then, of course, other things like transaction data. Sometimes we have contention around this, but you see, this is what we're saying. Transaction data, as long as it does not include personal data. When you give me a transaction, maybe a bank statement, and you've removed surname, name, and all, maybe a phone number, that is transaction data, but I cannot tell who it relates to. Then personal data, so maybe here, just before I leave it, so when sometimes you're probably, especially guys that do assurance services, audit, sometimes you might be required to redact. We call it redacting. You might want to probably redact some information, and therefore it moves it from being personal to non-personal data. Maybe you use it to kind of inform certain insights to the people who are going to read your report. So you might be able to pull that transaction data, but the moment you redact any information, like you see this side, any information this side that is personal, then it moves away from being personal to non-personal because there is no data that includes personal elements. So under personal data, of course, it means that that data includes the name and surname of that person, and it is appearing with other personal data. Maybe this is appearing with a policy number, that is for our insurance products. This is appearing with this. Maybe you have proof of address. This is appearing with gender or any other information. Here it becomes personal data. Then we have what we call special personal data. You have religion, you have trade union membership, sexual orientation, criminal history. Those would form your special personal data. In case in case we have questions, we can post them. I am going to immediately go to this slide, but also this slide, I'm not going to take a lot of time here because I would like us to go to the flow maps. So here, this image, we have shared the life cycle of personal data. And not to speak to the text side, I'll just go here that on the image on the diagram that when we come in touch with a data subject and we are establishing a relationship, it might be a transaction, but the moment we come in touch with them and we start interacting, the first thing we definitely do is collect data. They are going to speak to us. They are going to maybe they are going to call in or contact center, phone call. You're collecting data. We'll collect that data. When we collect the data, we're going to use the data. If it's in the contact center, Tony Malcolm Batu has called in. My account number is this. I'm having an issue with my bill payments. I've collected data. Next thing, how do I use that data? Am I sharing it with the people in utilities? Am I sharing it with the people in alternate channels? Am I sharing it with maybe a colleague, and they don't even need to know that information? So in this use of information, we need to make sure that we are using the information for the purpose we have collected it. These are some of the things that we have in our legislation as Uganda. Then sharing the data. How are we sharing the data? Normally, we say that we must make sure that we share the data at need to know basis, but also the data should be shared in a secure way, because sometimes you might share the information and it is intercepted by the wrong elements. That's how you would find the issues of people coming, saying my Western Union was redeemed by someone else. What happened? When the data was being shared, it was intercepted by someone because the security protocols were not sufficient to to cut out that perpetrator. So in sharing data, we must make sure that we share it securely, share it at need to know basis. And under further processing, we say that we only process data in line with the reason for which, or for the purpose for which we collected it. If you collected my data to assess if I qualify for a certain loan, I don't see why you should now be sharing my data with the Safe Border people to start sending me messages just because I applied for a loan to buy a car, and now you've shared my data with Safe Border people. They know I don't have a car. So they are sending me text messages. Yeah, Safe Border today, your Tony, Friday, are you not going out? So further processing, we must make sure that we only process the data for the purpose we collected, collected it, but also not just sharing it out there. Sometimes when we're processing that data inside the organization, you must make sure that it is still in line. Storage of the data, of course, our laws here require that we have the data in our custody for not less than 10 years. As long as the relationship or transaction ends today, we must count 10 years from then. Before that, we are not allowed to destroy the data. And of course, the way we are retaining it or storing it, it also must be in a secure way that someone is not going to come and compromise it. Someone is not going to come and start accessing it and, um, making sure that they do some dubious things for their benefit. Destruction, we destroy the data in a way that makes it de-identified. I am highlighting this word here. Let the information be de-identified. That's why most of us, we have shredders in our organizations. Okay, yeah. So maybe quickly the most important points for us today. This slide might be a bit on the left. This image might be a bit not so clear, but uh, these are basically touch points, like we have said. They are touch points in the flow mapping. When we come in touch with the information, customer has entered the branch. What happens from the time they enter the branch to the time I destroy their information? Where has their information gone? We have to identify all the personal information touch points. How do we collect data from customers? If you do not identify the touch points adequately or exhaust them, it means you won't be able to have accurate data flow maps. Yes, that's what it means. It means you have some things that are left out. So you must make sure that all the touch points have been identified. In my organization, how can I do this? I might not have all these touch points, but it's good to have a template or a standard, probably industry best practice. What are some of the touch points that people have identified? When you read this side, you will see that emails are touch points. Internet banking, someone comes and uses internet banking. That's a touch point. Someone calls, that's a touch point. We can't just say that let's limit ourselves to when a customer walks in and writes on a form physically. No, 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 no. The moment they call us, there is personal data that's going to be shared in most of those calls. So that's a touch point. Open internet touch points. Sometimes people go there, they search on our website and they'll probably leave a comment. ATMs, banking agents, post machines, internal systems, walk-in customers. Someone is walking in to do a Forex transaction. They are not our customers. They walk away, but many times we have collected their personal information. How? Someone can post for us in the comments and we'll see it. Walk-in customer has walked in. We've collected their personal information. How and why? If someone can, you can just put it in the comments. Walk-in customers. what is some of that personal information we've collected? Yes, social media, mobile applications, and other things. So on the right, we are saying that these personal data touch points, most of them we will have forms. We have form reviews, then we want to make sure that we have a personal data touch point register. Like you've seen this side, you'll actually go ahead and build that register to make sure that everything you are interacting with, we are tracking it. After this, if we have looked at the forms, so here we also have the practice of reviewing our forms, the account opening forms, the loan application forms, the insurance application forms, maybe claims for dormant accounts, all those forms, we review them on a periodic basis. Depending on the materiality of the information collected, you might decide you want to review this form on an annual basis. And why is it important? It is important because you might find that there are some of us in the industry still collecting. When I'm opening an account, you're still asking me if I am married. What is the use of me telling you if I am married when I'm opening an account? Well, sometimes some information at that point is not important. Maybe when you're giving me a loan, it might be important, and it is important. Yes, definitely. But when you're opening an account, why is it important? Okay, you'll say you want to do some data insights, you want to see what kind of products that I'll need later. Okay, well and good if you want it, but we need to make sure that we're not collecting excessive information. It's one of the requirements in our legislation here in Uganda. So we review our forms on an annual basis, depending on materiality. Some of them might be at a longer period, but also trigger basis. The law, yeah, the PDPO has come to us and given us a certain guideline. You might want to go back and check those forms and see, are we in compliance with this guideline? So electronic and hard copy forms, systems, and personal data inventories must be reviewed periodically to ensure that these are in line with the existing or the reigning requirements. Here, we're not going to spend a lot of time here. We just brought this to say that other technologies and global trends also affect how we need to work on our data flow mapping. It has changed and distorted the whole picture we had about 5 or 6 years ago. Why? You have a metaverse. A metaverse. This has changed the whole way that we do business. Because a metaverse, like we're saying here, is a platform of immersive and interactive experiences. Users enter different worlds and interact with other users. You know, someone just goes and puts on augmented reality reality glasses, and they're able to probably tour, they're able to go in a certain, they're able to go to Disneyland and tour it. Now, through that whole experience, there is actually a vast amount of data you're collecting. So we're saying that a vast amount of personal data may be collected on participating individuals. For instance, you're understanding their behavior. By the time he comes or she comes to put on those glasses, you have their name, you have their contact. And now you're able to see what they're interested in. You're able to see that when they went to do a tour, that augmented reality tour, they were so interested in looking at the fish, they were so interested in looking at the birds. But when it came to probably the big animals, they're a bit scared. They don't. That is information you're actually collecting on a customer. So we as players in the industry, we need to make sure that we are keeping on track with these changes. Now, because we want to quickly go to the flow maps. So some of the things still under personal information is that we have what we call personal data fields, and we're saying that these must be documented in personal data inventories. Now, these elements we're talking about are important for us to be able to know how to do the flow mapping, because the flow mapping will only be effective if you know these things and you have understood them very well. And we're talking about personal data inventories. We're saying that these must be reviewed and updated, maybe annually. Unless there is a significant change, you can maybe review them when there's a change, which could probably be after 8 months. When you last reviewed them, immediately you have to, or you can actually say at least annually. So one key element here is personal data inventory. Number two, we're saying that personal data must not be used in ways that may adversely or negatively affect data subjects. You see, when your phone is stolen, those guys are actually processing the data. The guy steals your phone. He doesn't want to sell the phone most times. The selling of the phone these days is secondary. Before it was primary. These days it's secondary. Why? Because these guys have mastered the art of dealing with personal data. Phone is stolen within an hour. It is sitting in a group of people who are hacking into it, who are reviewing the different records to find out what is your NIN number, to find out what is your date of birth, to find out different things, to be able to change maybe your credentials and get access to people on maybe WhatsApp, or even go and access your different accounts. So personal data is very important, friends, very important. And we are saying that when we're doing the flow maps, they must be developed to have an accurate view of the way in which personal data is processed and reviewed annually. Let's make sure that the flow maps are reviewed annually. Why are we saying that they must be accurate? Like I said when we talked about the touch points, if you miss out some of the touch points, you might be left with some personal data that is not being managed adequately. So we must make sure that all touch points are clearly indicated in a register to know that yes, we collect data every time a person calls us, we collect data, and what data do we collect, so that we're able to manage it effectively. So we've talked about personal data inventories, and the diagram you see here is a sample of the ones we have here. Now, this is an Excel form, but recently the guys are going through a system rollout, and some of these things will eventually be on systems. But what you see here was saying that you need to create a record of personal data elements. These are the elements you see here. These are the elements. So what we're looking at is the personal data inventory. Remember, we said it is important for us to have this inventory for us to be able to draw a map accurately. Yes. So elements in a data inventory, like you see here, one of the elements is personal information, the description. Is this element found or no? Now, when you say, I want to review this form, I'm going to review the account opening form, or I'm going to review an insurance onboarding form. And these are some of the elements we collect in personal data. When you're reviewing that form, then you're going to ask yourself, does this form ask for a customer's first name? Does it ask for their last name? Does it ask for marital status? Does it ask for nationality? So here you'll be saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Then here you ask yourself, why do we collect this information? What is the business reason for collecting this information, and what is the purpose? So that is one of the things we do when we're reviewing the personal data inventory. And then here you ask yourself, where does the data come from? Why do you share, with whom do you share this information? Where do we store the information? Are you store, sometimes you'll say, yeah, we store the information in maybe this system. Yeah. But then someone says this system, but they leave out the fact that we collect the information using a physical form. So, okay, you put it in the system, but where is the form? So those are very important things. You need to capture everything comprehensively. Where do we capture the information? Yes, you have it in this system, in this system, in this system, but where is the actual physical form? Also, that has to be covered. How long do we keep the information? Here, the law requires that we have 10 years, but sometimes because of legal obligations, it might be a contract, it might be a lease agreement that maybe says we're going to use this structure or this building for 20 years. Now, does that mean just because the government here has allowed us to destroy information after 10 years that will destroy that agreement? No. How long do we keep it? We're keeping this for 15 years. What is the reason? The reason is because it's a contract that is maybe 15 or 12 years. All right, a record of the personal data processed by a business area, and we track how, when, and why, and the person that is using this data. In case you have any questions, please, you can put it in the chat. We'll be handling them, but also colleagues, like I said, from the different organizations, in case you see a comment, please go ahead and you can respond. You can give us your experience, but also please supplement. Let's share the knowledge. Your personal data inventories, how do you do them? Do you have a system? How is it working for you? Maybe you might want, if you care, you might want to share some of the good and acceptable business practices from your organization. So looking at the flow maps, and here we'll say that flow maps for us Some things might not apply on your side, but many of the things here, for instance, here we do what we call privacy impact assessments. And we normally do such assessments on maybe you have a new product, maybe you have a new system, maybe there's a change that's going to happen in the business. We do an impact assessment in terms of privacy. Are we going to be collecting personal information? No. Okay, that's good. Then you go down and it says, are you going to be using any personal information from another system? Yes. Well, you might have said you're not going to collect, but you're actually going to feed on personal information from another system. There's going to be some integration. There's going to be some, maybe you're migrating data from one system to another. So those impact assessments help us to see such things. Are you going to share the data with anyone? Do they have the same or actually higher standards of privacy? Then we have personal data inventories. We talked about them, systems and controls, third party, and I won't spend a lot of time here. And so some of the reasons we have put here, still I will not speak to all of them. We're saying, why do we require data flow mapping? We already spoke about the fact that sometimes there is cross-border flow of information. So we need to identify if there are data transfer agreements in place, because these are required by the law. And if your flow map doesn't show you that you have information you're receiving and eventually it's ending up in another jurisdiction, then you won't be able to track the required data transfer agreement. So it is important. And number two, we're saying we need to understand the systems that need to be communicated to central IT and security for specific privacy requirements. For instance, if they discover that me, as Tony Malcolm, I collect information on maybe staff that probably come and say, yeah, I'm having an issue here, and I think compliance requirements, maybe I might not be in a good place. Can you help me? How do I deal with this? If you have such declarations, what security systems have been put in place to ensure that the information that comes to me does not get accessed by other people who don't have those privileges? So you want to understand the systems that required and the security protocols. You want to understand where there are special personal information and child PI that needs additional security. You know, for minors, according to our law, but also all international laws, the minors, we must get consent from their person who is their custodian. We needed to establish third parties processing PI. In case you have third parties, I know most of us have third parties giving us services, like people that do our API integrations, or you're using maybe a certain company to do SMS notifications to your customers, or you're doing payment services. We normally have third parties. So we want to make sure that we are aware of what they are doing. Understanding the source and initial purpose to make sure that we don't go astray or we don't go off track, and also to manage consent to ensure that whenever we're going to do something different, we get consent from a customer, identifying who the responsible parties are for the information. Colleagues, remember we are saying, why do we need data flow maps? Why? Yeah. And you remember we said they are visual. They are visual. They are quite easy for someone to understand besides the text that you have in your standards. Yeah, it's easier than what we have in our policies here. It's a flow, a diagram. We're going to see them. We identify the sources, understand where they reside, and enforce record retention. We want to know where the information is sitting, make sure that wherever the information is sitting, we'll have it for not less than 10 years. Those are some of the things. Now, how does a flow map look like? So this is the process. We're saying when we are coming up with a flow map, you're going to see one in our head, but how do we come up with a flow map? Number one, we say, where does the personal data come from? We've spoken about that. What data are we collecting or receiving? We've spoken about that. Why are we collecting the data? We've spoken about that. How is this data being collected? Remember, we talked about phone calls. Most times we're looking at the physical form. Most times we're looking at maybe WhatsApp chats, if you have a WhatsApp chat for your organization. But even phone calls, if a customer has been given this provision to contact you over a phone call, who has access to this data? Why are we processing the data? How are we processing the data? What data do we require for processing? And why are we asking what data do we require? Are you collecting more data than you actually require? Are you collecting excessive data? Those are some of the questions. When will the data be processed? Are you collecting data that you're planning to process 3 years after now? Those are questions that are important when we're coming up with the flow map. Where does does the personal data go? What data is being sent? Who receives the data? Why is it being transferred or sent? Why? Do we need to send it? When is it being transferred? What happens to the data when collected? And once it expires, how do we destroy it? What you're seeing here is an example of a flow map. This one is for a supplier. Remember, when a supplier comes, you collect data from them. So this is the visual expression of the other questions. Let me just go back. These are the questions. Let me go ahead. This is the diagram of those questions. Like I said, someone should be able to see it immediately and be able to interpret it. Maybe here, because the images are quite small, you might not be able to see the things quickly. In about 10 seconds, you should be able to tell what is happening. But this is just an example. And I know that we've improved these things over time. And in your organization, some of you even have better ones because now we have systems that can do these things. So we've picked this out. And here you're seeing this is the supplier here, down, top left, supplier vendor. Supplier comes, they submit their credentials. Then here, someone is processing the data. You see how the data is going. So the data comes here. We are processing it here. It comes here. There's a system that is processing it. It comes here. But as it comes this side, there is also something else that you see is coming back on this particular process. Because this is quite small, you might not be able to see the things very well. But I guarantee you that these images actually in your own organizations are very, very simple for you to draw when you ask the other questions that we have on the previous slide. They are very easy to draw and they are very important for you to draw. What are these boxes we have here? If you have people in your teams that do what we call process mapping, then those people are very well versed with these particular segments. This segment shows you that this process is this receipt and vendor selection. But under receipt and vendor selection, these are the process we do. After that, we do what we call a handoff. Handoff. You send the information to someone else, and you have a vendor onboarding team doing all these things. For some of you, all this might be in the system, but it's good to demarcate. Then you have the process. Here, procure to contract. This is also another process. Let me quickly go to another example, and then we shall be wrapping it up in about 2-3 minutes. This is another example which is very common to most of us. This is a customer. This is you and me walking into someone else's business, opening an account with them. And we're saying this is the flow map of the information that we pick from a customer. This is how we process a customer. So colleagues, if you haven't done flow maps as yet, if you had not done them as yet, what you're seeing here might look complex, but I guarantee you in your organization, it will be very simple. Why? Because you understand this, you've been dealing with it, but what maybe you wanted to do is to now put it in a visual expression and make the images actually very simple. Make them simple for people to understand, make them simple for a layman to look at the flow map and understand it and be able to pick out the different elements we talked about. Where are we storing the information? Which systems are we using? What protocols are required? How long are we keeping the information? And like you see this customer who has come to open an account opening form, we are saying they will submit the account opening form here or a loan application. It depends. Or maybe someone has come to refresh their account. That is already an activity of collecting information. We're saying that information will come here. The relationship manager will receive it. That information will be scanned into here. We have the system called Cybrin, image and workflow. And when it comes here, it will go to our core banking system. When I want to do a transaction, it will go to what we call a risk. We have a risk assessment system that profiles them. Then we have Hadoop. Hadoop is our data, is our EMDW, is our enterprise management data warehouse. This is where our data sits. So it shows you where the system, where this information is sitting. But you know what? The information came here for storage, but on this side, someone scanned that information. You see, all these are diagrams showing you what is happening with that information. Touch points. Remember the touch points? Someone scanned that information. Then here we have a relationship manager who still sent it here after scanning it. And then still from here, we're saying when that information is gotten, the relationship manager here, if you're dealing with credit applications, relationship manager has the information here, then the that information will go to a credit manager, but also it could go to the securities. Depending, is someone applying for a loan that is security based, it should go to securities. So these things you already have them in most of your other processes. Here, what we want to do is let us do the same for how data flows. All right, so to quickly wrap it up, this last slide, okay, we'll have a few other slides. This one, we won't really speak so much to it. It's about data control environment or data management. If you see here, is how do we manage data? We need to make sure that we have a data governance and data ownership culture. So therefore, you need to have data owners, stewards who make sure that the information is kept well, committees which discuss any issues around data or how to improve the data. And then you have working groups, especially when you have different activities you want to do. You have the metadata management. I won't really speak so much to that. Some of these things are done by your IT people, but maybe to come here, that data integration, that sometimes file transfer controls, data load controls, and reconciliation controls are also very important for us, especially in the compliance space. You want to make sure that these are following the regulations. Quality of data, our regulation says that we should not be holding inaccurate data about customers, so data quality is important. That flow map will actually show you, is there somewhere where the data is going? And we need to check, are people actually copying phone numbers from people's application forms and typing the wrong numbers? That is something good for us to note. On the flow map, you will be able to see which are the touch points, where are the handoffs? Are we still maintaining the integrity of that data? I'll go to this slide. This talks about transfer of data, privacy controls for sharing personal data. These are also in our regulation. Actually not most, all of them are in our regulation. So we're really not going to talk so much about them because we want to go into the questions. But we say that we process this data in line with agreements we've made with customers. Remember, we said, for instance, if the law gives us 10 years, but your agreement is for 15 years, you've bought maybe a property for 15 years, it doesn't mean that you throw away the agreement after 10 years. We retention of personal data, manage privacy complaints. I believe we all manage complaints because the regulation requires us to handle these as well. Complaints, right to audit, objection to processing. These are some of the elements we need to remember that customers can object for us processing their data. We need to raise awareness within our teams. By the way, colleagues, this is very important. You won't be able to effectively implement or execute the privacy program in your entity if awareness is not raised. So we need to make sure that we have an intentional plan and a program of raising awareness within our different teams in the organization. Other control requirements for organization is minimality. Let's only collect information that we need. Let's not collect excess information. Retention of data, we already talked about this. We talked about updating personal data inventories. Security safeguards, make sure that people don't have rights to the systems they don't need, or someone is being given rights to a system. If it's read only, you're an auditor, why are you being given rights that allow you to post something? Yeah, we've had a number of issues around digital fraud. So let's make sure that from the privacy side, we are also able to support our businesses to manage some of these things. And I think on the last slide here, supplier control requirements. This is for suppliers. We're saying that we make sure that they also comply with local privacy legislation. Remember, this is someone else supplying you a product or a service. We need to make sure that they are also complying to the requirements, because a breach on their side might actually bring a filter effect into our own side, and we also have a breach. Notify data subjects of onward transfer of personal data. We must always notify them. I believe we all know that the privacy statement of your organization can help you to cater for these nuances. Are you going to transfer the data? Are you going to deal with third parties? Are you going to, share it with regulators? The privacy statement can deal with those nuances. So let's always make sure that we are in compliance with the requirements. Consent for processing, very important element here. And so Anita, I request that we stop it here. I'll just leave this image on the screen and bring it back to you for colleagues to supplement. And also, if there are questions, we shall take them. Thank you so much for listening. Over to you, Anita.
All right. Thank you so much, Tony, for sharing such valuable insights on data mapping. We truly appreciate the knowledge you have shared with us. Participants, if you have any questions, please raise them in the Q&A panel so that we do not miss them. Okay, I do not see any questions so far, but we'll give it about 2 minutes to see if questions come by.
And yes, Anita is also requesting that if there are some people who can maybe supplement on a few things, maybe about 2-3 people, you could also give them an opportunity. Thank you.
Right. Okay, please do let us know if you have something to supplement. Okay, there's a question here, Tony. Someone says, how do you enforce acquisition of consent from data subjects? You could maybe take that.
Okay, thank you so much, Anita. As we maybe get the other questions coming in and other people to actually supplement and tell us their experience, we are saying, how do you enforce acquisition of consent from data subjects? It really depends. If you are looking for consent for you to offer them a certain product, a certain service, it means you're getting that consent on the application forms. You know, now these days we're in the digital era, people are even using digital signatures as long as they sign on that form. But also, of course, you don't just make people sign, we explain to them. I'm wondering where we would not be able to get consent from them. Some of those instances might be when we actually need to share their information to maybe the regulators. In that case, the law allows us to share that information. You might not be actually able to go back for them to give you consent, but where you have a court order, where the regulator needs the information, there you're able to share it. But also maybe another issue we've always seen is where we have family members. They want maybe to do some things on an account for a person who has passed on. There you have a right. They are not allowed unless they present to you the letters of administration. So those letters of administration will be the consent for the person who owned the account for you to be able to share that information. I might not have answered it because I'm not sure of the actual case, but those are some of the things that I know you can use. Make sure when the person is filling in an application form, they have signed it, you've explained to them and they've signed it. In other cases where the regulator requires the information or the law, those ones, the regulation gives us that permission.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Okay, I would take, I saw Winston's hand was up. Winston, if you could come in, then we shall go to Isaac. Okay, Isaac, I think you can come in.
Yes, thank you, Anita. Kindly confirm that you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to supplement. Thank you, Tony, for the presentation. I wanted to supplement on the idea of consent. There is also obtaining passive consent in data management. There is what we call passive consent, like in the examples where the data subject is going to access a facility and you are going to capture their images and their faces and some other special personal data. So in that case, as an organization, you can put up privacy notices and where the data subject can consent and say, this place is under surveillance, 24 CCTV surveillance, and then by entering into the place, they have actually consented to the notice. Secondly, there's, like, for example, here, when you were starting this meeting, Anita, you informed us that the meeting is being recorded. So whenever everyone was coming to log into the meeting, they were aware that there's going to be a recording and, certain data may be collected in that particular sense. Then the second thing I wanted to supplement on is when you are drawing flow maps, you start, like Tony was saying, you start with understanding your system heat map. Like in the organization, you could be having very many systems that you are working with depending on different products. So you have to understand which system holds which data, and how much data is being collected and processed in which system. Like Tony is projecting to us the data flow map for sourcing process. There's a data flow map for customer onboarding process, data flow map for online channels, data flow map for. So it is important to have maps that speak to each and every system that relates to personal information that you're dealing with. So the good step, like in this slide, it's important to assess and say which data am I collecting, where is it going, and how is it processed. But that should happen when you have drawn down a system heat map, and then you also show by table which data is being processed and collected in which system. So if it's like an organization with departments, you can ask every department to bring up the systems they use and also to explain which kind of personal data they collect with their systems, if it's a system. If it's a physical kind of environment, you still draw a map using the flow processes in a physical records management environment or data management environment. Yeah, thank you so much. That's what I wanted to supplement. Over to you, Anita.
Yeah, yeah, actually, thank you so much, Isaac. Like Isaac said, you actually do all this working with the people in your team. This is not just you, you are the champion, but they actually have to do that feeding into the exercise because they need to own the whole exercise of drawing the flow maps. Thank you so much, Isaac.
All right. Thank you so much, Isaac and Tony. We do have a question for you in the Q&A panel, Tony. Someone is inquiring if personal data inventory is supposed to be done for every data touch point.
Oh, sorry, Anita. The question was?
So the question is, can personal data inventory be done for every data touch point? Is it supposed to actually be done for every data touch point?
Yeah, so the inventory will actually be fed in by the touch points, because touch points are just you're just becoming aware of how am I getting the information, where is it coming from, whereas the data, the inventory itself is showing you what kind of information you are collecting. And normally what we do, like Isaac said, you can use teams. You can go to the teams and find out, you, the accounts people, what kind of information are you collecting? Are you collecting people, information from creditors, data? Then after that, you'll be able to categorize your information. So the touch points, you might not actually create an inventory for each touch point. You might do it like that, but eventually then you have to come and integrate and categorize the information and make it a little bit smaller, because the touch points are quite many.
Hey. All right, thank you very much. I will take these two questions. Okay, I think you already answered something related to consent, but someone had asked from an insurance background dealing with telecoms, how best can we get consent from telecom clients to enable data sharing in order to facilitate claims assessment?
Isaac, I'll give that to you. In case I need to supplement, I will. But yeah, Isaac, over to you.
I beg your pardon on the question. From an insurance background?
From an insurance background dealing with telecoms, how best can we get consent from telecom clients to enable data sharing in order to facilitate claims assessment?
Okay, I think we still have to use the principle of privacy notes and personal data acquisition. Like if you're going to deal with a client as an individual, there should be claimers and disclaimers on the form about the quality and amount of personal data to be collected. So by the client ticking off that, it is going to be indicating that they have consented to the collection of their personal data, whether they are going to provide it or not. Then secondly, if you're dealing with the entity, like for example, the telecom company, there should be OLS, organizational level agreements, and then service level agreements between the insurance firm and the telecom company. And there should be data privacy clauses in such documentations. And then you see that you are covered in the line of consent in regards to obtaining and collecting or processing personal data. So the clauses will actually determine how far and how much data will be collected and processed. If it's going to be an app, like for example, these days there are apps of registration, and then there's going to be maybe below the app, there's going to be consent provisions given within the app or system being created. If it's a form, you still indicate that on the form, that consent that you're providing this information. Like we have terms and conditions on every form that we register with in the telecom companies and insurance companies. So in that relationship, there can be mitigations and relationships that can be made to ensure that privacy clauses are catered for. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac.
Okay, thank you, Isaac. Tony, would you like to supplement?
No, we can move to the next one because of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the next question, which I believe is going to be our last question, it's a very interesting question. Someone says, beyond having the data mapping diagrams, practically, how is it used on a day-to-day basis?
Very, 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 very beautiful question. Yes. Thank you, Anita. So before you actually put in place the data flow maps, you might not be able to experience, you might not be able to see the value add. But when you do the flow maps, then you'll definitely be able to see the benefit of having them. We actually went through those things. As I speak, let me just quickly go to that slide. Now, these are steps that you follow to draw the maps, but when you read them, you'll actually identify that they also give you the benefits. So to answer that question, I'll even use another question by one of the people. So Paul says, how can data mapping help organizations identify and eliminate data silos? Thus promoting data accessibility and collaboration. This is one of the answers. That with a flow map, you're actually going to be able to identify that you have silos. So tackling this both questions together, like I said, if you have people in your organization that do what you call process flow maps, they'll be able to help you to study and analyze these maps. For you might draw them and you might not be able to use them so much to do what we call process improvements. You'll probably do the other basic things that we talked about, that the flow map helps you to identify where is the information coming from. Okay, do we have the right security protocols there? Is the information being accessed by the right people? Okay, are we giving the rights to the right people? Are there people having access information? Or if we're collecting the flow maps, if we're collecting the data and we're collecting the data, storing it in this place, is this place actually, I'll tell you, for instance, there are CCTV issues that probably Bank of Uganda raised in some of the organizations in one of the years. People are collecting CCTV footage, but the storage was not sufficient to hold that surveillance footage for more than probably even 30 days. I tell you, for some it was probably 90 days, others it was 30 days, others it was probably just a week. Why? Because the hard drives were small. So some people went into the industry looking for hard drives of 5 terabytes. Me with the flow map, I'll show you I'm collecting CCTV footage and it's being stored in this place. Then I'll give you specifications. The application or the server where the information is sitting has, for now, we have 200 terabytes. But if you're recording every event that is happening on a daily basis, do you think after 30 days you'll have that information? So when a customer comes and they are claiming they never withdrew money, maybe someone impersonated them, you're not going to be able to use that CCTV footage. So for instance, from my experience, we eventually had to look at other alternatives. Can we go to the cloud? Can we buy more storage? So those are some of the things. Paul, thank you so much for that question. Very beautiful question, because it has given us insight to some of the benefits of having these flow maps. And of course, like Joshua, you asked, these are things that we can on a daily basis discover the moment you go into the exercise. Before you have them, you might not be able to tell. So maybe to go back the silos, when you look at those maps and you analyze them, you'll be able to see that I'm collecting probably data in 2 different places, but I can collect it once. Why am I making people to sign 4 different forms for me to be able to give them an account, give them an ATM card, give them a checkbook, give them internet banking, give them, why do I have 4 different forms? I tell you, there are some of the things that we have gone through as an organization. And eventually you tell yourself, like someone asked about the consent. Eventually we've gone down and we're like, instead of having 6 forms, I can have 2 forms. And in those forms, I have different products, but I also have privacy statements that are telling the customer, in case you need a credit card, when you come back, I'm not giving you another form. I'm using the same form, but you've consented. So the moment you come, we'll just do an activation. Of course, all those things, these are things that we can use to benefit from this. So to Paul's question of silos and integration, when you study the maps, you'll be able to see some of those things. That is just one of the examples. Why am I having 4 different applications when I can do an application once? Why am I collecting data in 4 different systems when I can collect and store it in one place? Why is the information going to 3 different authorizers? And it's taking me a whole day to authorize an account when I can have only 2 authorizers. Yeah, so when you go into the exercise, it can actually open up a lot of possibilities for you to improve your privacy environment. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Tony. I think we are coming to the close of the webinar. I would ask to get parting shots from you, and then we'll be able to close.
All right, thank you so much, Anita, and very, very, very grateful to the Personal Data Protection Office and all the work that you are doing. Also with the UBA, thank you for always giving us these opportunities to be able to share knowledge and also interact with the other people in the spaces. So maybe just to encourage the colleagues online, that let's go ahead and share with our people within our organizations. Where you have questions, you can always reach out to the privacy office. Anita is here. She's very responsive. She's very actually interactive. She's always on the go. In case you have any questions, I'm very sure she'll be available to assist. All the different organizations that have joined, thank you so much. I see some of my colleagues in a different fraternity, Mr. Masambu, Emma from Byte organization, all the people that have asked the questions, thank you so much. Barbara, some of the questions probably we didn't handle them, but thank you. And also for the supplements from Airtel, Arafat, people from BRAC, Absa Bank, some of our colleagues are here, some colleagues that have been mobilized by the UBA. We appreciate and thank you so much. One thing I'll tell you is privacy is going to continue becoming a bit complex because of the way the metaverse is opening up. So let's always be on the lookout. The legislation keeps changing across the globe because of information becoming so much available, but also becoming very, very high risk because people can use it for anything. When you go into the smart homes, smart cars, that information, if you have my biometrics, I think you can cause an accident. You can just hack into my car. So all those things are going to create a lot of work for the personal data protection office, and they'll definitely need our support to be on the front line to implement this. Well, from us, Absa Bank, Isaac, thank you so much, colleagues, Wickling, and we'd like to appreciate everyone and thank you for the opportunity. Have a blessed day.
Okay, thank you so much, Tony. And as we wrap up today's session, I would like to extend a huge thank you to you, of course, for sharing such insightful knowledge on data mapping. This has really given us a clearer understanding of how to track, organize, and protect our data effectively. And of course, we are grateful to Absa Bank for sending your staff to facilitate today's session. Please do send our regards to the rest of your team when you get back. And of course, to our participants, I earlier shared a link in the chat. Please click on the link and give us feedback on this webinar. But we would like to thank you so much for joining us and for being interactive. We hope this webinar has provided valuable takeaways that you can apply in your work. If you'd like to revisit any part of this session, we'll be sharing the recording as well as the presentation. Stay connected with us for future webinars. We are available on all pages, on all social media pages. Feel free to follow us on Twitter or X. We are at PDPO Uganda. We are on LinkedIn. We are on Threads. We are on Instagram as well. Otherwise, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.